Hi, Professor Shaw. Are we doing physiology today or chapter 14?
Oh, thank you for letting me know. I thought this is Thursday today, and I uploaded. Uh, Let me go back. Thank you,
Oh,
guys.
it's Wednesday.
Yeah. Oh, no. Cool. Okay, so today I will go over the combined chapter 14 and 15, which is the peripheral nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. But peripheral nervous system, we have not covered a lot, very few, only the plexus, their branches, which part of the body they supply, that's all, not a lot in peripheral nervous system, like cranial nerve, spinal nerves, some plexus, their branches, that's all. We're gonna focus almost 80% time in autonomic nervous system. And autonomic nervous system is important in both physiology and anatomy because a lot of neurological pharmacology, the drugs effect is on through the autonomic nervous system. So we have to learn the basics of the autonomic nervous system. So I will go over an overview of the peripheral nervous system, PNS, and we will talk about 12 pairs of cranial nerves, where they originate from and what are their functions. There is a course of the cranial nerves and which is complex, and at this time we're not gonna cover the course of the cranial nerves. You're gonna do that later in professional school. Then we'll also talk about 31 pairs of spinal nerves, how we name them, how they exit, and how they form. Then we will focus on autonomic nervous system. So we'll define autonomic nervous system, or ANS. As you know, the first thing about autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is purely a motor nervous system. And the motor neuron, which goes to visceral organs, which controls smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. That's is autonomic nervous system. So again, autonomic nervous system is not the sensory part. Autonomic nervous system is purely the motor system of involuntary organs. Okay, that is the starting point of autonomic nervous system. First, you know that, and then we start from there. We'll explain the relationship between autonomic nervous system and peripheral nervous system, which we did last time a little bit, but I will go over again over them. I will compare autonomic neurons and somatic motor neurons. So autonomic motor neurons and somatic motor neurons, both are the motor neurons. That means they exit from spinal cord or brain and supply the organs. So if it supply the skeletal muscle and body wall, then we call them somatic motor neurons, means motor neurons controlling the soma, the body parts. Whereas autonomic neurons are the motor neurons which controls visceral organ, involuntary organs, who are made up of the three kind of tissues, and they are, go ahead, someone.
Repeat the question.
I'm checking the attention. So
Smooth.
autonomic nervous system controls the visceral organ, and they control mainly three kind of tissues or organs, and they are
Muscle.
Cardiac,
Smooth.
cardiac muscle, good,
Muscle.
smooth muscle,
Smooth.
glands,
glands, good. So that's the only difference is one is controlling the skeletal muscle, another is controlling the involuntary organs like a smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. Describe the basic division of ANS. There are two divisions, the sympathetic division and parasympathetic division. Anatomy and function of sympathetic and parasympathetic division of ANS. So we're going to talk about what is the anatomy of sympathetic and parasympathetic and how they are different from each other anatomically, and so they are different from each other functionally. Explain the sympathetic function of the adrenal medulla. Adrenal gland is a gland which sits on top of your both kidney. Okay, that is called adrenal gland. And adrenal glands are the post-ganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system. So they are gland, but they contain neuron, post-ganglionic neuron. And they release chemical transmitter, but those chemical transmitters are not neurotransmitter, they are hormone. So adrenal medulla release hormone, and post-ganglionic sympathetic neuron release neurotransmitter. They have similar effect, but they are different. One is neurotransmitter, another is hormone. That's what we're going to talk about, the adrenal medulla. Okay. So after that, let's start with the clinical case. Job-related stress is a concern for people in many occupations. One response to stress is an increase in autonomic or sympathetic nerve activity. What are some health-related problems that can result from chronic sympathetic stimulation? So let's see if you are in a work environment or in relationship where you have always continuous stress, fear, anxiety, threat. And if you have any emergency excitements or threat case, your sympathetic nervous system always is on alert. That means your sympathetic system release a lot of epinephrine, norepinephrine, which increase your blood pressure, which constrict your blood vessel, which affects your hippocampus, which is memory center of your brain. And if your blood vessel is constricted, what happens? That increase your blood pressure. And that is the long-term complication of the stress, which is also associated with sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so you're going to see when we talk about sympathetic nervous system. So if I say peripheral, the autonomic nervous system, ANS, is the part of peripheral nervous system. The statement is true or false?
True.
True. It is the part of the peripheral nervous system. Only thing is, this is motor system of the three structures: smooth muscle, glands, and cardiac muscles. Peripheral nervous system has both sensory and motor. Like when your sensory neuron takes impulse, the stimulus from your finger, from your body to the spinal cord and brain, that is sensory. And when it comes motor neuron and control the activity, that is motor. That is peripheral nervous system when they are outside, like cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Cranial nerves and spinal nerves are mixture of sensory nerve and motor nerve. And motor system, the part of the peripheral nervous system which is going to the smooth muscle, glands, and cardiac muscle is the autonomic nervous system. How many times I have repeated same statement, and I'm going to put in question exam. I have put every semester. The autonomic nervous system controls all of the following, but skeletal muscle, and still some student will make mistake because they don't pay attention. Okay, but very few students will do that. 90% will not do that. 10% will do that. So please pay attention. Okay. Organization of peripheral nervous system. This is general visual motor part of the PNS. As I said, this is the part of peripheral nervous system, which is the visceral motor part. And it has two divisions, that is parasympathetic and sympathetic division. So let's go talk about the peripheral nervous system first. So here is central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. The green arrow is bringing sensation. So you can see sensory pathway here of the peripheral nervous system. Somatic sensory, visceral sensory. Somatic sensory is from the body. Visceral sensory is from inside the body cavity. Sensory efferent division then takes through the peripheral nervous system, that is spinal nerve and cranial nerve, to the brain and a spinal cord, and then interneurons makes the judgment. Then motor pathway brings through the red arrow through the peripheral nervous system, motor neurons, and then motor efferent division divide. Some of them goes to skeletal muscles, motor nervous system, motor innervation of all skeletal muscle, and that is called somatic motor system. And some goes to smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands, and we call them autonomic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system is visceral motor. This is motor and controlling the visceral organ. It has two division, sympathetic division and parasympathetic division. Okay, so with that overview, everybody got now the peripheral nervous system, sensory pathway, motor pathway, somatic motor, and autonomic nervous system. Let's talk a little bit about the peripheral nervous system before we go purely to the autonomic nervous system. So peripheral nervous system is composed of cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. Cranial nerves attach to the brain and pass through a specific foramina of skull. That is the intervertebral foramina. Not intervertebral foramina, sorry, the cranial foramina. There are several foramina in the cranium, and they are numbered from Roman number 1 to 12. Okay. The 12 cranial nerves, number 1 is
Olfactory.
olfactory, number 2, optic, number 3, oculomotor, number 4 is number 3, oculomotor, olfactory, optic, oculomotor, number 4, trochlear, number 5, trigeminal, number 6, abducens, number 7, facial, number 8, vestibulocochlear, number 9, glossopharyngeal, number 10, vagus, number 11, hypoglossal. Is it hypoglossal? No.
No.
Accessory. Number 12, hypoglossal. Okay. So these are all the cranial nerves. We're going to go over them. Cranial nerves 1 and 2 attached to the forebrain. So number 1 and 2 exit from your forebrain. Otherwise, all other cranial nerves are attached to the brain stem or exit from your brain stem. Primarily serve head and neck structure. All cranial nerves control the organs, visceral organs in the head and in the neck, but it also controls the body wall of the head and neck through the sensory pathway. Okay. The vagus nerve is the only cranial nerve that extends into the abdomen. So from 1 to 12, 10 is the vagus nerve. Name is vagus. You know, vague means very weird. That's why the city Vegas is whatever happens in the Vegas remains in the Vegas. Similarly, vagus nerve
That's
is,
funny.
go ahead.
That's funny, Professor.
Okay, so the vagus nerve is vague. It is the only cranial nerve which exits from your brain, but it goes pretty much all over the body in the visceral organ. Name it. It is in your cervix, it is in your ovary, it is in your urinary bladder, it is in your GI tract, it is in your heart, lungs, inner ear, middle ear cavity, nose, pharynx, larynx, everywhere. That's why we call it vagus nerve, okay? Otherwise, all control in the head region. So here you go. We are looking from the base of the brain, Okay, so you are taking the brain and then you are turning around and you are looking from the inferior. So this is like upside down your brain, and you see the brain cranial nerve. Here, the first cranial nerve starting in your olfactory bulb above your nose. Then through the olfactory tract, it comes and goes to the smell area in the temporal lobe. Here is cut of optic nerve, cranial nerve 2, which start here in the eye, in the frontal lobe, under the frontal lobe in your eye. And then the optic nerve, then some fibers of the optic nerve cross. We call it optic chiasm. And then optic tract goes all the way to the occipital lobe, both sides. So these two, first and second cranial nerve, are attached to your cerebrum. Rest are in the brainstem, midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. So let's see here. The third is oculomotor. So first cranial nerve, what is the function of olfactory? It is responsible for a smell. Second is optic. It is responsible for vision. Oculomotor, third cranial nerve, you see it is exiting at the junction of midbrain and pons. That is also for movement of your eye. Eye has 6 extrinsic muscles, and those extrinsic muscles are controlled by this nerve, oculomotor nerve. Trochlear nerve is also responsible for your eye movement. Then we have fifth, trigeminal. Tri means 3. Geminal means it has 3 branches. The first branch is ophthalmic, which control your eye. Second is mandibular, under the eye. And third is, second is maxillary, and third is mandibular. They take the sensation and motor area in this area, okay? Then after fifth, you have sixth nerve. You see here? Abducens. This is also responsible for eye movement. Then facial nerve. Facial nerve is the sensory mixed nerve, and it is sensation from your face and motor movement in the face. Eighth is vestibulocochlear, which is responsible for hearing and balance of your body, which goes to your inner ear. Then ninth is glossopharyngeal. Glossopharyngeal is responsible for taste and sensation in the pharynx and the part of the tongue. The vagus control visceral organs like heart. It reduces your heart rate. It helps in digestion. It helps in contraction of bladder, lungs, everywhere. Accessory nerve are the motor which helps in shrugging of your shoulder. Okay, it has 2 parts, the medullary part and a spinal part. And then hypoglossal nerve is the nerve which moves your tongue. So these are the cranial nerves. Okay, this is in the cadaver. You can see the same nerves here. Here are the nerves, their name, whether they are the somatosensory or somatic motor or both, they are here. So let's see one nerve, olfactory nerve. Sensory functions, visceral sensory, not the somatic sensory, smell. Motor function, no, it is purely sensory neuron. Optic nerve is also purely sensory nerve. Oculomotor is purely motor. That means visceral motor, parasympathetic, oculomotor, okay? Trochlear. This is both visceral motor and somatic motor, oculomotor. So somatic motor is extrinsic eye muscle and visceral motor are other muscles inside the eye. Trochlear, somatic motor. Let's see another one, the vagus. It is general taste, somatic motor, visceral motor, everywhere. So this is the nerve and what kind they are, okay? Now, spinal nerves. How many spinal nerves we have? We have 31 pairs of spinal nerves. And each spinal nerve contains like thousands of nerve fibers, which is called axons. Okay, thousands. And these spinal nerves connect to the spinal cord. So named where they exit from. So let's see, cervical spinal nerve exit from cervical area. The thoracic spinal nerve exit from thoracic. So 8 pair of cervical spinal nerves are named from C1 to C8. How many cervical vertebra we have?
7.
8.
Seven.
I'm sorry. 8.
7. But how many spinal nerves we have?
8.
How come?
1 exits above C1.
Very good. 1 exit above C1. That's why we have 8 pairs of spinal nerve. Similarly, we have 12 pairs of thoracic nerve, 5 pairs of lumbar, 5 pairs of sacral, and 1 coccygeal. Okay. So you can see the nerves here. This is the spinal nerves here, named after the region. This ganglia here. And then the spinal nerves, the ventral rami of the spinal nerves forms the cervical plexus. Brachial plexus means several level of, you see, nerves. So do you remember spinal nerves when the spinal nerve exit from intervertebral foramen, they branch into rami. There is anterior rami, we call the ventral rami. And then let's see, this is the spinal nerve in my left side. So from 2 level, the anterior parts, they join, and that forms the plexus. And those plexus then make a bundle and then again branch off and goes to the body part. And that is called cervical region. We have cervical plexus. In the brachial region, we have brachial plexus. Cervical plexus divide and supply the nerve in the neck. Brachial plexus divide and supply in the upper limb. That's why in the brachial plexus, you see, in the cervical and lower part of the cervical region, there is cervical enlargement. In the thoracic region, there is no plexus. So we have intercostal nerves, lumbar enlargement, and then you have similarly lumbar plexus, sacral plexus. You see, sacral plexus has the largest branching, that is called sciatic nerve, and then sciatic nerve branch a lot and supply the lower limbs. Okay. Okay, so you can see here, sciatic nerve, saphenous nerve. What happened? Turn off your mic, please. Okay, so here, cervical plexus and the brachial plexus again. And these are a lot of other dermatomes nerves. You don't need to worry about those nerves. That is anatomy. I'm just giving you some idea of this is the detail. We're not going to go there. So there is these plexes. Let's see in the brachial plexus, the nerves. You see, the first branch, axillary nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, then median nerve, radial nerve, ulnar nerve, like which side their branching are. Based on that, they have these nerve branching. The cervical plexus in the neck region, lesser occipital nerve, greater auricular nerve, transverse cervical nerve, supraclavicular nerve, phrenic nerve. Here is the point to note, phrenic nerve, important. This phrenic nerve comes down in the thoracic cavity and supply the diaphragm in the same side. So let's see if somebody has a vehicle accident and there is cervical vertebra fracture, and if somehow in the posterior triangle of the neck you damage phrenic nerve, what's going to happen? it's going to paralyze your diaphragm in the same side. And if your diaphragm is paralyzed, which one will be affected, inhalation or exhalation?
Oh,
Primarily
Inhalation.
inhalation,
inhalation.
because diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles are the prime muscles for inhalation, inspiration. Okay, so phrenic nerve damage can cause paralysis of your respiratory muscle, main muscle, diaphragm, and patient will die then and there due to hypoxia. Okay. Okay, let's talk about autonomic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system is the visceral motor division of peripheral nervous system that regulates body activities that are not under conscious control. And they are usually called involuntary system, involuntary nervous system. And all the autonomic nervous system is regulated by your cerebral cortex, hypothalamus, and particularly the medulla oblongata in the brain stem and some part of the limbic system, the system of our emotion part of the body. Okay. So effector organs and general function of the ANS. What are the effector organs of autonomic nervous system? Again, those three structure: smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. So if you control these things, three organs, that means you are controlling most of the vital function of our body, like heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, urination, those function. Okay. Same thing I talked about earlier, relationship between ANS and peripheral nervous system. So twice. Okay. Now, comparison of autonomic and somatic motor system. Let me ask you before. So you are like augmented to receive the information. Which one you think, autonomic and somatic motor system, which one you think is faster, autonomic or somatic? Somatic. So if something is fast, that means they have like not a lot of transit on the way. And if something is slow, that means there will be a lot of transit on the way. You're going to see that in the pathway of motor tract for the autonomic nervous system and motor tract for the somatic motor system. Okay. So let's see somatic motor system. Somatic motor system has one motor neuron which extends from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscle. So let's see, if I flex my biceps, that means motor neuron from my spinal cord will be only one motor neuron. Their cell bodies will be in the spinal cord, and then their axons will be branching and supplying my biceps muscle. That's why it is faster. Okay. Their axons are well myelinated and conducts impulse rapidly. That's why they are fast. Whereas autonomic nervous system has chain of two motor neurons. The neurons, which is before the ganglia, which are usually in the central nervous system, are called pre-ganglionic neuron, and the neuron which are in the ganglia are called ganglionic neurons. So if the cell bodies are before the ganglia, we call them pre-ganglionic neuron. If the cell bodies are in the ganglia, we call them ganglionic neuron. And conduction is slower than somatic nervous system because they are either thinly myelinated, very thin myelination, or no myelination at all. Motor neuron synapse in ganglia, because in the ganglia, you know, ganglion or ganglia. Ganglion are singular and ganglia are plural. So ganglia are group of neurons outside the brain and spinal cord. If they are autonomic neurons, then we call them autonomic ganglia. If they are group of somatic motor neuron, then we call them somatic sensory. Somatic motor is not there because they have only one. If they are somatic motor neuron in group, which is sensory somatic, they are sensory somatic ganglia. Okay. So here you go. Have a look. 30-second. Here we have red, somatic motor, autonomic, which is visceral motor. See the comparison. Okay. So from the first lecture, you know, in the spinal cord, we have gray matter. It has posterior horn, lateral horn, and ventral horn. Posterior horn is the cell bodies of the somatic sensory neuron. Anterior and lateral are motor neurons. So anterior is somatic motor neuron, cell bodies lying here. That's why they look gray. And lateral is containing autonomic motor neuron cell bodies. Okay. So somatic motor neuron cell bodies and their axons comes here, you see, supply the skeletal muscle. And you see whole axons are heavily myelinated. Myelin, use the blue, myelination. So they come through the ventral root. On the other hand, the pre-ganglionic neuron of autonomic nervous system is also in the spinal cord, but in the lateral horn of a spinal cord. And then pre-ganglionic axons are myelinated, but thinly myelinated, whereas post-ganglionic neurons, these ganglia are on the side of your spinal cord. Do you remember sympathetic chain ganglia when we talk about that in the spinal cord? These are, in this diagram, we are looking at only one spinal and somatic motor neuron. If you take whole spinal cord, such a diagram will be in every level of the spinal cord. Okay, so that is the autonomic ganglia. And this is postganglionic neuron. And you see postganglionic neuron in this diagram is synapsing with the intestine, which is the smooth muscle wall. Clear? Okay. Sympathetic and parasympathetic division, they're both sympathetic and parasympathetic has two motor neurons before the ganglia, after the ganglia, or in the ganglia. They are innervated mostly the same structure. Both sympathetic and parasympathetic are controlling the same structure because they are the part of autonomic nervous system. So they supply the same smooth muscle glands or cardiac muscle, but they have opposite effect. If they both are two neurons, two order of neurons, both control the same organ, why they have opposite effect? Any guess? Just guess.
And stop.
The difference in
Mm,
sound, all of that?
Difference in what?
Well, I mean, each they all do different things, like different structures or something like that.
They are in the same structure. Let's see, both of them are in the GI tract wall, but they have opposite effect. Any guess why that may happen?
One would sympathetic would stop digestion and parasympathetic would start digestion.
Yeah, so they are opposite effect. Yes. Why are they causing opposite effect? If they both
Balance?
Due to where the blood flow is.
blood flow. How any neuron, if you remember your nervous system, how any neuron, if you are physiology people, you should answer this question here. How any neuron affect an organ? What does it do? It releases neurotransmitter, yes? And the neurotransmitter binds with the cells of the organ, and then organ shows effect. These sympathetic and parasympathetic postganglionic neuron release different neurotransmitter in the same organ, and they bind with the different receptor in the same organ. That's why they have different effect. Okay. So sympathetic is fight, flight, and fright. Fight means when you have emergency, what happens? You fight. And if you cannot fight, then what do? You fly away. That's flight. Or fright, like you have fear. That is sympathetic nervous system is. So sympathetic nervous system is activated during extreme situation like exercise, excitement, emergencies, and it is always concerned with consuming energy. So when sympathetic activity is high, you consume energy, you use glucose because brain use glucose. But parasympathetic is rest and digest and concerned with consuming energy. Okay. So when you're resting, you are parasympathetic. What does that mean? In the body, it is a homeostasis, autonomic homeostasis. So in each organ, there is sympathetic and parasympathetic all the time working. So when you're resting, let's see, my right hand is parasympathetic and left is sympathetic. So when I'm resting, my right hand is up because this is parasympathetic. When I'm in excitement, my left hand, sympathetic, is activated. And that's how it balances your body all the time, okay? Some other anatomical difference of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Look at the diagram. In the left side of the patient, we have sympathetic, and in the right side of the patient, we have parasympathetic. So if you see parasympathetic here, the parasympathetic motor neurons, pre-ganglionic motor neurons are coming from, which region is this? Cranium, yes? And some are coming from the sacral region, yes? That's why parasympathetic nervous system is also called craniosacral division, because they come from cranium or head region and the sacral region. Are you following me? They come from there, but you see they supply all over the body. If you see in the right side, all the preganglionic neurons are in the thoracic region and the lumbar region. That's why sympathetic nervous system is also called thoracolumbar division. So their preganglionic neurons are coming from different region of the brain and spinal cord. That's why they have different name. Another AKNO name like thoracolumbar outflow or craniosacral outflow or division. But if you see, they are supplying the same organ. You see eye, then salivary glands, heart, both side. Okay, length of postganglionic fiber, sympathetic. Let's see here. Sympathetic pathway. So you have preganglionic neuron, and there is several collateral branching here. And then it is synapsing with the ganglionic neuron, and they release neurotransmitter that is called acetylcholine. And then postganglionic neuron release another neurotransmitter that is called norepinephrine. And this is sympathetic nervous system. Let's see the parasympathetic. Preganglionic fiber. Very long compared to sympathetic. Postganglionic fibers are in the wall of the organ it supplies. So the autonomic ganglia of the parasympathetic nervous system is inside the body wall of the organ it supplies. So if it is in the heart, the ganglia will be inside the heart. If it is in the lungs, it will be inside the lungs. If it is in smooth muscle of intestine, it will be in the wall of intestine. But if you go and see sympathetic division, the ganglia is the way before the organ it controls. That's why sympathetic ganglia are just on the side of a spinal cord, and some of them are in front of the spinal cord. Are you following me? Okay. So the parasympathetic autonomic ganglia are inside the wall of the organ. That's why the ganglia is also called intramural ganglia. Intramural ganglia. Okay. So intramural ganglia is the parasympathetic ganglia. They are in the wall of the organ they supply. Okay, let's talk about the neurotransmitter. Pre-ganglionic fiber or pre-ganglionic neuron of sympathetic nervous system release neurotransmitter here. What was the neurotransmitter? In the
Acetylcholine.
acetylcholine. And postganglionic neurotransmitter in sympathetic was
Norepinephrine.
norepinephrine. And here in parasympathetic, what it is? It is acetylcholine. So they release different neurotransmitter at the end of postganglionic neuron. That's why they have opposite effect. Anatomical difference in sympathetic and parasympathetic is continuous. So neurotransmitter released by postganglionic axon, sympathetic, most released norepinephrine, adrenergic. Why we call adrenergic? The sympathetic nervous system which release norepinephrine is called adrenergic neuron, because in British English, norepinephrine is adrenaline, noradrenaline. Epinephrine, the epinephrine is adrenaline, and norepinephrine is noradrenaline. That's why we call them adrenergic and noradrenergic, because these norepinephrine came later. The original name of this neurotransmitter is adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay. Whereas parasympathetic postganglionic neuron release acetylcholine. That's why it contains choline. So we call them cholinergic effect or cholinergic nerve or neuron. Same thing here. All the neurotransmitters. Acetylcholine, acetylcholine. Let's see, parasympathetic has another here, acetylcholine. So preganglionic acetylcholine. And then postganglionic parasympathetic is norepinephrine. And in adrenal medulla, there is preganglionic neuron and postganglionic neuron are the cells. And they produce epinephrine and norepinephrine directly, and they are hormones. So they don't bind with the plasma membrane receptor. They circulate in blood and then go to heart and other organs, and so its effect. Okay, role of the adrenal medulla in the sympathetic division. So here you go. This is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is also called suprarenal gland because it sits on top of our kidney. So let's see, when you are in excitement or emergency, see here, this is the kidney, the adrenal gland. So when you are under the threat or excitement, then autonomic preganglionic autonomic neuron is coming here, you see. They release their neurotransmitter and then activate this adrenal medulla cells, which are modified postganglionic neuron in the center of the adrenal gland. And now these cells then release the same epinephrine and norepinephrine, but they are not binding with any receptor. They are diffusing into capillary bed, which capillary bed then takes it all over the body. And when these epinephrine and norepinephrine reaches the target organ, they bring the same effect, whatever will bring brought by the epinephrine and norepinephrine as neurotransmitters. Are you following me? So the difference between epinephrine as neurotransmitter, and the hormone is, one is transported in blood, another is put into the synapse. But they have the same effect inside the cell. Oh, we are done? Okay. I think we are done. So let's go to our, because we have time, our clinical case. So let's see, let's follow the steps. If you are in very stressful, like your boss is not a good guy, very stressful, like creates all the time stress, how it will affect your body stepwise. You have a stress, so that will activate your autonomic nervous system. Which one, sympathetic or parasympathetic?
Sympathetic.
Sympathetic, that sends the pre-ganglionic neuron from your brain to the
Adrenal gland.
adrenal gland, and at the same time, all the postganglionic neuron will also release epinephrine or epinephrine. And your parasympathetic nervous system also will release epinephrine and norepinephrine in the synapse, which will activate the visceral organ and then activate the organ function, smooth muscle contraction, cardiac muscle, blood vessel, like blood vessel middle wall is a smooth muscle. So they constrict and increase your blood pressure. At the same time, you release stress hormone, which is called cortisol, from the outer part of that adrenal gland. And cortisol also cause like constriction of blood vessels, build up more fluid in your body, more diastolic volume, and increase blood pressure. It also affects your hippocampus, memory gland, mammillary body, and that cause like loss of memory, suppression of immune. And that is the long-term consequence of the continuous stress. Okay. This is first time we are finishing a minute ago.